a 26-year-old woman, have been engaged to my fiance, whom I'll call Mark, for about 2 months. We met 4 years ago through a dating app and have been inseparable ever since. Mark is my soulmate, the one person who has never let me down. My life hasn't been easy. My parents split when I was 2, and my father walked away without a backward glance. He sent child support, but that was the extent of his involvement. My mother, now 48, wasn't exactly a nurturing parent either. When I was young, she was more interested in her social life than in raising me. I was mostly raised by nannies and caregivers. As I grew older, my mother, still young herself, prioritized her social circle and dating over parenting. She was a lively socialite with little time for me. As a freelance artist, she earned decent money, but the child support covered my needs, so she didn't have to worry about me. Honestly, without that financial support, I suspect she would have pushed me out much earlier. She was never truly committed to me, and I always felt she was waiting for me to grow up so she could be free of me. When I was 13, she started dating my stepfather, Tom, now 50, who had a daughter my age, whom I'll call Lisa. When my mother first brought Tom and Lisa to our home to meet me, she stressed that I needed to behave perfectly because this relationship mattered to her. She'd introduced boyfriends before, but never cared about my behavior then. Usually, she'd just warn me about guests, and I'd retreat to my room until they left. This time, though, I sensed she was serious about Tom. The first meeting with Tom and Lisa was pleasant enough. They were polite, and it went smoothly. I had no clue how things would unravel after that. Soon, Tom started visiting more often, and it felt like he and Lisa were practically living with us. It didn't bother me much. As long as they left me alone, I was fine. Lisa split her time between our house and her mother's, and initially, everyone either ignored me or was cordial. I was okay with that since I wasn't attached to my mother or anyone connected to her. All I wanted was my own space and peace. But then my mother and Tom decided to make their relationship permanent and move in together. I wouldn't have minded except my mother announced that I'd have to share my bedroom with Lisa. I refused outright. My room was my sanctuary, the one place in the house where I felt safe. Sharing it with a stranger was out of the question. When I stood my ground, my mother and I had a fierce argument. She threatened to kick me out if I didn't comply. At 14, I knew enough about the law to realize she couldn't legally evict me until I was an adult. I called her bluff, pointing out that she was making empty threats. Frustrated but unable to follow through, she converted the basement into a room for Lisa. It wasn't a bad space. My mother put effort into making it comfortable and attractive, almost as nice as any other room in the house. I didn't see the problem. But for some reason, this sparked Lisa's resentment toward me. It might have been because, during a house tour on the day they moved in, my mother announced to everyone that Lisa was stuck in the basement because I refused to share my room. I couldn't fathom why she'd say that publicly. Maybe she wanted to guilt-trip me, or perhaps she just loved stirring drama. Whatever the reason, it made me feel awkward and embarrassed for Lisa, though I didn't regret my decision. Unfortunately, it set the stage for conflict. From that moment, Lisa treated me like an enemy. She only stayed with us half the time, but those days were unbearable. She was vicious, throwing cruel insults at me to my face. For example, she once said my father probably left because of me, then laughed as if it were a joke. She mocked my appearance because I was a bit overweight back then and even ridiculed me at school. Lisa had a clique of mean girls, and they made it their mission to torment me. Before, they'd ignored me, which I preferred, but now they actively bullied me. The worst part? I hadn't done anything to her. Her grudge stemmed from my refusal to share my room, a petty reason to try to ruin my life. My room was my refuge, especially with a mother like mine, and I don't think anyone could fault me for wanting to keep it. If Lisa or anyone had tried to build a relationship with me, I might have considered sharing, but she was a stranger, and I wasn't willing to sacrifice my peace for her. I never complained to my mother or Tom because they knew what was happening and didn't care. I could have been bullied forever and they'd still ignore it. I had to endure Lisa's cruelty, and fighting back only made things worse. Our parents would step in, and I'd end up grounded because they favored Lisa. She'd fake tears to escape trouble, but I wasn't manipulative like her, so I took the blame. They'd lecture me to treat Lisa like a sister while letting her get away with everything. It was a miserable environment, and I hated my life. When I was finally kicked out around my 18th birthday, I felt more relieved than upset. I'd endured years of their toxicity, and it only got worse. Lisa remained a nightmare, and our parents always took her side. By the time I left, she'd turned most of our high school against me, leaving me with just a handful of friends. My mental health suffered, and I'd gained more weight from stress eating, which hurt my appearance. My grades were slipping too, making me feel like a failure in every way. Home was no better. My mother grew harsher, constantly comparing me to Lisa, who'd made my life so much worse. Before Tom and Lisa, things were tough, but after they moved in, it was like jumping from bad to unbearable. My mother went from neglecting me to actively making me feel worthless, and it felt like I was living with bullies at home too. It was clear Lisa was the daughter my mother wanted, and I was a burden she resented. I had no other family to turn to. My grandparents were estranged, and I knew nothing about my father or his side. I felt too ashamed to ask friends for help, so I stayed with my mother to survive until I turned 18. But just weeks before my birthday, a major incident changed everything. It was a weekend I'll never forget, one of the most stressful days of my life. Lisa had started hanging out with an older crowd, including a college senior her friend's brother was dating. I knew she was drinking and likely using drugs, but I didn't tell our parents, knowing it'd backfire on me. That day, I left my room unlocked while showering. Suddenly, my mother was pounding on the bathroom door, demanding I come out immediately. I rushed to get dressed and found her, Tom, and Lisa in my room looking furious. My mother pulled out empty liquor bottles and a bag of marijuana from under my bed. They assumed it was mine. I believe Lisa planted it there and tipped off my mother. They screamed at me, calling me a disgrace. My mother didn't just yell about the alcohol and drugs. She unleashed years of resentment, accusing me of eating all their food, being a burden, and having no future. I tried explaining it wasn't mine and suggested Lisa set me up, but that only made her angrier. She called me jealous of Lisa and said I'd never measure up to her. I was sobbing, but she didn't care. Eventually, she told me to leave the house, saying she was done with me. When I asked where I'd go, she said she didn't care. Just get out. When I refused, she threatened to call the police, claiming that since I was nearly 18, they'd take the drug accusations seriously. She called me an addict, draining their resources, and said she was tired of pretending we were a family. I begged her not to throw me out, but she was unmoved. Tom and Lisa acted like nothing was happening. Faced with the threat of police, I packed my things, choosing the streets over arrest. By evening, I left without a goodbye from anyone. I sat in a park for hours, but it got cold, so I went to my friend Sarah's house and asked to stay. Sarah knew about my family's behavior, so I didn't need to explain much. When I told her what happened, she was appalled and insisted I tell her parents. I'd always kept my family issues private, but that day I opened up. Sarah's parents were horrified and tried calling my mother, but she was rude and unyielding. Realizing it was pointless, they offered me a place to stay for as long as I needed. They were well off, and Sarah was happy to share her room. I lived with them for the next few years, attending community college since my grades limited my options. I worked, saved money, and eventually moved out 3 years ago. Sarah's family helped me settle into my new place and made it clear I was always welcome back. That was a turning point. I lost weight, improved my health, and felt better about myself. I started earning enough to support myself and decided to try dating, hoping to find someone to build a future with. I dated a few guys before Mark, but nothing lasted. When I met Mark, I knew why. He was the one. Early on, I didn't know he was wealthy or set to inherit his father's restaurant chain. I just liked his humor and charm. When he later shared his background, it didn't change how I felt. I loved him for who he was. After a year of dating, we moved in together and his family welcomed me warmly. Everything was perfect, so when he proposed 2 months ago, I said yes without hesitation. But then, 2 weeks ago, I got an email from Lisa. We hadn't spoken in nearly 8 years and I hadn't kept up with my family since I left. Her email apologized for her past behavior, admitting she'd planted the drugs and alcohol to get me kicked out because she hated me for no reason. I found it suspicious, especially since I'd recently announced my engagement on social media, and someone from our high school likely told her. Curious, I investigated and discovered Lisa's husband owned a company supplying packaging to Mark's restaurants. Using a fake profile, I checked her social media, which led me to her husband's profile, where he detailed his business. Since Mark and I were learning to run his family's company, I knew about their suppliers. I told Mark about the connection, and we decided to end the contract. The quality of Lisa's husband's products had declined, and they were already considering a cheaper, better alternative. Last week, Mark met with Lisa's husband to cancel the deal. Now Lisa thinks I did it out of spite and has been blasting me in emails and social media posts, claiming I'm holding a grudge. She mentioned losing other clients, and our decision was the final blow. She even tagged our business's Facebook page, causing a stir. I feel a bit guilty since they're struggling, but part of it was business. Mark and his father wouldn't have dropped the supplier just because of me. Still, I wonder if I should have influenced the decision. Update 1. Mark consulted his father's lawyers, and they believe we made the right call. We're pursuing legal action to have Lisa remove her post and are filing a defamation claim. Her husband's company overcharged us for subpar products, and we found a better deal elsewhere. It's just a coincidence that Lisa's married to him. Instead of improving their business, she's slandering us online. I'm grateful for the support I've received. It's helped me see I shouldn't feel bad after everything she put me through. Update 2. A few days ago, Mark and his father filed a slander lawsuit against Lisa and her husband. We'll meet with a mediator soon. Meanwhile, my mother has started defending Lisa again, trying to contact me since Lisa was served. It feels like high school all over again, but I'm not that vulnerable teenager anymore. I've blocked her and moved on. I'm engaged to the man of my dreams, and I don't need their drama. Update 3. We won the defamation lawsuit. Mark's father's lawyers were relentless, and Lisa and her husband had to pay for their actions. We reached a settlement, and now we can focus on our wedding. I'm thrilled to marry Mark, my soulmate, and I'm ready to leave the past behind.